Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room was lit harshly, fluorescent light humming above, bouncing against the steel walls that felt colder than the air itself. Officers' voices overlapped, sharp, urgent, full of confidence that sounded like bravado more than belief. Maps and data feeds flickered across screens. Lives hung in the lines they traced. And yet, no one asked her anything. She sat still, silent, a shadow at the edge of the storm. They didn't mean to ignore her, at least not deliberately, but her silence unnerved them. It wasn't the silence of shyness. It wasn't fear, it was something else, something heavier. And so they mistook it for emptiness, for absence. One of the younger lieutenants even smirked at her, whispering too loud to the man beside him. Why's she even here if she won't speak up? A few chuckles. Dismissive, small. She didn't look up, didn't flinch, just let the moment pass, because she knew what they didn't. She knew that silence had weight. Silence could shield, could cut, could protect. And in missions like this, fragile, dangerous, walking the knife's edge, sometimes silence was the only thing keeping everything from collapsing. But she couldn't tell them that, not yet. The colonel's voice broke through. We've got a window of 23 hours before comms blackout. This is one shot. One. His finger stabbed the map. If we fail, the outpost is gone. Every man, every woman inside, and we'll never get another chance. Silence this time collective, heavy. Her hand twitched against her thigh, a small human motion. No one noticed. They called the mission impossible. Too far behind enemy lines, too fragile in planning, too many ways it could fall apart. And yet here they were, and here she was. Not by accident. Her file was thicker than most, not filled with commendations, though there were some, but with notes, warnings, questions written by commanders who never quite understood her. Unorthodox, doesn't integrate, silent under pressure. They wrote it like a flaw. They never understood it was her strength. But one man had understood, once, long ago. Her brother. He had been the first to tell her, don't let them mistake your silence for weakness. Hold it. Let it make them uneasy. Then when you finally speak, they'll listen. She hadn't spoken much since the day they buried him, but she carried those words, like a weapon, like a shield. And tonight, this mission, they would matter more than anyone knew. The colonel ended the briefing. Chairs scraped, boots scuffed. The room broke into fragments of conversation, laughter forced against fear. She stayed seated, eyes fixed on the glowing map as it blinked and shifted. The target pulsed red. The outpost. A young medic passed her, hesitated, then whispered, "Good luck, ma'am." She almost smiled, almost but not quite. Her silence followed her out of the room. The transport smelled of oil and damp metal, the kind of smell that seeped into clothes, into skin, into memory. Engines roared low, constant, a heartbeat of machinery that made conversation a shout. Most of the team filled the noise with talk anyway, banter, nerves disguised as humor. She sat near the back, watching, listening, silent. A corporal leaned across to another soldier, shaking his head. "She hasn't said a word since we boarded. Creeps me out." "She's always like that," the other replied. "Don't know why command even keeps her around." They both laughed, nervous laughter, thin, brittle. She closed her eyes, let the sound fade, and in its place her brother's voice again. Laughter brighter, warmer, real, a different time, a field outside their hometown, summer sun overhead, his voice teasing her. "You can't always hide behind silence. One day it'll protect you, but one day it might cage you too." She hadn't answered then. She wouldn't answer now. The engines shifted pitch. The crew chief shouted, 10 minutes, the joking stopped. Weapons checked. Hands tightened straps, faces hardened. She opened her eyes, focused on the ramp ahead. 10 minutes and everything would begin. Or end. The landing zone was wrong, too exposed. Wind tore across the barren ridge carrying dust that stung eyes and teeth. No cover, no trees, only jagged rock and endless sky. They disembarked fast, moving like shadows despite the daylight. Boots grinding against gravel, every sound too loud. Radios whispered. She moved with them, smooth, silent, step after step. No one spoke to her. No one asked her opinion. They didn't want to hear what silence might say. But she saw it, the flaw, the danger in their path. And she kept it to herself. Not because she wanted to, but because silence, once broken too early, lost its power. She would wait. She had to. Hours blurred, terrain rough, mission fragile. The team was straining already, backs aching, nerves raw, fear hidden behind tight jaws and quick glances. A storm gathered on the horizon, dark clouds rolling, thunder low and distant. The kind of storm that carried memory with it. She felt it in her bones. The air tasted like iron. A private stumbled, cursed, caught himself. He muttered, "This silence is killing me. Even the wind feels loud." She almost answered, almost, but didn't. She knew the silence wasn't killing them. It was holding them together. They just didn't see it yet. The colonel called halt. Maps unfolded. Arguments sparked about routes, timing, risk. Voices sharp, frustrated, layered over one another. And then the snap. Not a twig, not a rock, something sharper, closer, wrong. Every head turned, weapons raised, the storm wind howled. She stood still, perfectly still. Her silence spread faster than words could. One by one the others froze too, instinctively matching her. The noise of argument drained away. Only the wind remained. And in that silence she heard it, the faint metallic click, a trap. Her hand lifted, slow, precise, pointing. Nothing spoken, only a gesture. The colonel followed her line of sight. His eyes widened. He nodded once, ordered the team to shift left, careful, deliberate. A minefield, hidden under loose gravel. They would have walked straight through. No one said anything, not yet, but something had shifted. They had mocked her silence, but her silence had just saved their lives. Night fell, the storm broke. Rain pounded down, drenching gear, stinging skin, turning the ground to slick mud. Visibility dropped to nothing. The team huddled under a shallow overhang, waiting for lightning to ease. Breath misted in the cold air. Everyone shivered. Someone finally spoke. How'd she even notice? No one answered. She sat a little apart, rain dripping from her hood, eyes closed, listening, not to the storm, to the silence beneath it. Because there was something else out there, watching, waiting. And she hadn't told them. Not yet. What had she heard in the storm that no one else caught? The rain beat harder, drowning their nerves, masking every sound except its own relentless drum. Lightning painted the sky in stark flashes, white, violent, gone in an instant. The team clutched rifles tighter, each man and woman pressing themselves into the rock wall, waiting. But she didn't wait. Her silence stretched longer, heavier, and in it the faintest sound grew clear to her, out of rhythm with the rain, a steady hum, mechanical, distant but moving. Drones. She opened her eyes, glanced to the colonel, didn't speak, only lifted her hand again, 2 fingers raised, then pointed skyward. At first he frowned, not understanding. Then the hum swelled, louder, undeniable. Shapes emerged against the storm clouds, dark outlines circling like predators. The colonel gave the order, lights out, silence total. The squad froze, every flicker of glow stick snapped off, radios cut, even breathing seemed dangerous now. The drones passed overhead, searchlights cutting the sheets of rain, white beams stabbing, slicing across the rocks, one sweep away from finding them. She pressed her cheek to the stone, heart steady, not fast, not slow, balanced. The drones lingered, scanning, searching, hunting. Someone exhaled too loud, a sharp hiss of breath. She reached across, fast but gentle, pressing her gloved hand over his mouth. His wide eyes met hers. She shook her head once. Silence. The lights hovered, paused, then drifted away. When the hum finally faded, the squad exhaled as one, shaky and uneven. relief mixed with fear. The colonel's eyes found her again. This time he didn't dismiss her silence. This time there was respect there, unspoken but real. They moved at dawn. The storm had passed, leaving the ground slick and treacherous, the sky washed clean but pale. Mud clung to boots, slowed every step. Exhaustion etched faces, but no one complained. Not aloud. The private she'd silenced during the drones fell in step beside her. He was young, too young. His voice shook when he whispered, "You saved us, twice now. Do you ever get scared?" She didn't answer immediately. His question hung in the air, fragile. Finally she turned her head just slightly, met his eyes, and in the faintest voice, low enough that only he heard, she whispered back, "Every moment." His eyes widened, shock, maybe relief, because the truth mattered more than false courage. She didn't speak again, but that one word spoken at the edge of silence lingered with him. He straightened his shoulders, walked steadier. The mission grew heavier with each mile. Not the packs, not the gear, the silence. The silence between the men and around her. They weren't mocking it now. They were leaning into it, clinging to it, as though her silence itself was a shield they could hide behind. But silence carries weight, and weight always has a cost. She remembered carrying her brother's coffin. The silence of that day had been unbearable, not broken by music, not softened by words, just silence and the scrape of boots on gravel and the thud of earth against wood. It was then she learned, silence is memory, silence is grief. And yet it was strength too. She carried both. Midday heat pressed down. The squad took shelter in the ruins of an old village. Stone walls crumbled, roofs collapsed, silence thick with the ghosts of lives long gone. The colonel ordered a halt, water rations shared, weapons checked. She found herself sitting across from a sergeant older, his face lined deeper than the rest. He studied her for a long time before speaking. "Lost someone too, didn't you?" She looked at him, eyes steady, but didn't answer. He nodded anyway. "Yeah, I can see it. We all wear it one way or another, just some louder than others." His gaze softened. "Mine was my daughter, 12 years old. Cancer took her, never even got to say goodbye." He took a slow sip of water, voice quieter now. "Sometimes I think silence is the only way I keep her with me. Talking about her feels like letting go. Not talking," he trailed off, shook his head. "I guess you understand." For the first time since the mission began, she let herself meet someone's eyes fully. And she nodded, just once. That was all. The sergeant didn't need more. The outpost was still hours away, but already shadows of danger pressed closer. Scouts reported tracks, enemy patrols, the net tightening. Every sound mattered now. Every mistake could end them. They moved like ghosts, but ghosts could still bleed. As the sun sank low, the colonel signaled a stop. They were at the final ridge before the valley. The outpost lay hidden below, invisible but alive, waiting for their rescue or their failure. The colonel crouched low, map spread across his knees. He looked up at her finally. "What do you see?" It was the first time he had asked her. The first time her silence was not dismissed, but invited. She stepped closer, studied the valley. The patterns of movement, the rhythm of patrols, the gaps too perfect, too deliberate. "It's wrong," she said softly, her first words in hours, "too quiet." The colonel frowned. "Trap." She didn't nod, didn't shake her head, just kept her eyes on the valley. The silence stretched, thick, heavy. And then a flare, red, arcing across the sky. Shouts echoed from below, enemy voices, orders barked. The valley came alive with movement. It wasn't an outpost waiting for rescue. It was bait. The colonel cursed, "Fall back." Gunfire erupted. The silence shattered. Chaos, muzzle flashes lit the dusk. The crack of rounds split the air, sharp and merciless. The squad scrambled for cover, rocks splintering, dust choking. Voices shouted, panicked, lost beneath the roar of combat. She moved differently, Not louder, not faster, just precise, controlled, each motion exact. Silence within the storm. Her rifle found targets, not rushed, not frantic, just steady, one shot, another, breaths measured. But even silence couldn't hold forever. A round struck near her shoulder, tearing stone into shards. Another hissed past her ear. She ducked low, rolling behind a boulder, heart hammering now, but face calm. The private she had spoken to earlier screamed. She saw him, pinned, exposed, rounds raining around him. Without thought, she broke cover, sprinting. Mud slick under boots, bullets snapping overhead. She reached him, grabbed his vest, hauled him back behind cover. His face was pale, breath ragged. "Why'd you?" he started. "Quiet," she whispered. And in that one word, he understood. The silence wasn't absence, it was life. The firefight stretched, time warped. Minutes felt like hours, each second balanced between life and death. The squad held barely, their formation fraying but unbroken. The colonel barked orders, voice hoarse. The sergeant gritted teeth, firing, reloading, firing again. But it was her silence that cut through the chaos. Not louder, not commanding, just steady, solid, a center in the storm. When the enemy finally pulled back, fading into darkness, the squad collapsed into the mud, chests heaving. Relief, exhaustion, fear still clinging like sweat. The colonel wiped mud from his face, staring at her. "If you hadn't warned us." She said nothing. Because there was still something she hadn't told them. Not yet. They regrouped under the broken night sky. Stars pricked the darkness, sharp and cold. The squad counted heads, all still alive, barely. The private she had saved sat close to her now, shaking hands, gripping his rifle. He whispered, voice trembling, "How do you stay so calm? How do you not break?" Her eyes lifted to the stars. The silence stretched long before she answered. Finally, softly, "I already broke, a long time ago." His breath caught. He wanted to ask, wanted to know, but her silence stopped him. Because some answers cut deeper than questions. And some truths were better left waiting. For now. Why hadn't she told them yet? The squad huddled in the hollow of a ravine, darkness wrapping them like a shroud. Their breaths misted in the cold night air, nerves stretched taut as wire. Every sound beyond their circle felt like danger, the crack of settling stone, the whisper of wind through grass. The colonel crouched close, voice low. "We're off the plan, that wasn't the outpost, that was bait, someone's expecting us." His hand pressed against the map, smearing mud across its creases. "We need a new route, fast." No one spoke, too tired, too shaken. Except her. She could have spoken then, could have told them what she had suspected even before the ambush, that someone inside their own command had leaked this mission. That their silence, her silence, wasn't just survival but necessity. That if she spoke too soon, the wrong ears might twist it, might doom them all. But she stayed quiet. The weight of silence pressed harder than the rain-soaked pack on her shoulders. The sergeant broke it first. "We can't risk another valley. They'll be waiting. I say we cut north, follow the ridgeline." The colonel shook his head. "Too exposed, they'll see us for miles." Tension grew, every man and woman watching, waiting. And she saw it. The narrow cut in the rock face, hidden under shadow where the storm had carved a path the maps didn't show. A way forward, dangerous, tight, but possible. Her hand lifted, a simple motion. The colonel looked at her, his jaw tightened. "You're saying there's a path." She didn't speak, just nodded once. He studied her, eyes narrowing, but then he folded the map. "We follow her lead." It was the first time. And it wouldn't be the last. The cut was brutal. Rock walls closed in on both sides, slick with rain, forcing them into single file. Every scrape of boot against stone echoed too loud, claustrophobic, unforgiving. The private behind her whispered, "Feels like a grave." She didn't answer. Because that's exactly what it felt like. She remembered another narrow place years ago before the war, a mountain trail where her brother had taken her hiking. She had been 14, exhausted, ready to turn back. He'd kept pushing her forward. "Keep moving," he'd said. "It's never the wide roads that lead to anything worth finding." That had been the last time she remembered feeling safe in silence. His silence had been playful, comfortable, not heavy like this. Now silence pressed against her ears like stone itself. They reached the far end of the cut just as dawn broke. Light spilled across the horizon, pale and unforgiving, revealing the valley below. And there it was, the real outpost. Half collapsed, smoke curling weakly from shattered walls. The colonel's voice was a whisper, "God help them." The squad descended. Every step carried weight, every breath tasted like ash. Bodies littered the outer perimeter, some still in uniform, some not. The silence of the dead was worse than any she had carried. The medic ran forward, checking for survivors. Shouts followed, two found alive barely, dragged into cover, tourniquets tightened, morphine administered. She moved slower, eyes scanning, not the bodies, not the rubble, but the details others missed. The way the barricades had been torn from inside, not outside. The way the comms tower had been sabotaged, not destroyed by fire. It wasn't just an attack, it was betrayal. Her stomach turned. She wanted to speak, wanted to shout, but silence locked her throat, because speaking without proof would fracture them, turn suspicion inward, tear the fragile mission apart. So she said nothing. The colonel moved among the wreckage, face grim, voice steady. "We hold here until nightfall. Then we move again. We still have a mission." But his eyes found hers, and in them she saw it. He knew she was holding back. Not yet, she thought, not yet. They buried the dead. Hands raw from digging, sweat mixing with ash and dirt, every soldier gave back to the ground what they couldn't save. The medic whispered prayers under his breath. The sergeant placed a torn patch of cloth over a nameless grave. The private cried quietly, thinking no one noticed. She noticed. She placed no words over the graves, just silence, heavy, respectful, a silence that felt holy. But inside her chest, grief clawed. She remembered another grave, another silence, her brother's, and the words she had never spoken then, words she still carried like shrapnel in her heart, "Don't leave me alone." She never said them, never would. Because silence, even in grief, was the only thing she had left to protect her. Night returned. The squad huddled in what remained of a storeroom, broken walls shielding them from the wind. The colonel posted guards, ordered rest. Sleep was impossible. The sergeant sat across from her again, his voice low, reflective. "I used to think silence was weakness. After my daughter died, I filled every room with noise. Couldn't stand it. But now," he looked around at the squad, half asleep, half broken, "now I think maybe silence is the only way we survive." He met her eyes. "That's what you've been carrying, isn't it?" Her throat tightened. For a moment she thought she might answer, might finally let someone in. But before she could, a sound outside, small, too small. Not the wind, not the night. She froze, held up her hand. Silence dropped across the room like a blade. Every soldier stilled, weapons gripped. There it was again, the crunch of gravel under boots, slow, deliberate. The colonel whispered, "We're compromised." And in the silence that followed, she realized what she hadn't told them was about to become their only chance to live. The first shot broke the night. Glass shattered. Voices shouted in a language thick and harsh. The storeroom erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness, the air thick with dust and fire. She moved without hesitation, rolling, rising, firing, silent precision, each round deliberate, each breath controlled. But the enemy was too many. The private screamed again, pinned under falling debris. The medic dragged him free, blood slick on his hands. The sergeant cursed, firing until his rifle clicked dry. The colonel shouted orders, voice drowned by chaos. And still she said nothing. Until she had to. She caught the colonel's arm, pulled him low. Her voice cut through the storm, sharp, urgent, the first words she had spoken to all of them at once. They knew we'd be here. Someone told them. His eyes widened. The words echoed, even louder than the gunfire. The squad froze just for a heartbeat, doubt, fear. And then the colonel's face hardened. We hold. No matter who sold us out, we hold. Gunfire surged again. But something had shifted. Her silence was no longer just a shield. It was a knife, and she had just cut it open. By dawn, the attack had faded. The squad survived, barely, 2 wounded, supplies low, spirits shattered. The colonel paced, fury in every step. The squad whispered among themselves. Doubt now lived in their silence. She sat apart, head bowed, knowing the storm she had unleashed. The private approached her, face pale, eyes searching. If someone betrayed us, who was it? Do you know? She looked at him, held his gaze, then turned away without answering. Because she did know. But saying it would break them. And so she chose silence again. Not to protect herself, but to protect them. For now, who among them had betrayed the mission? The question hung unspoken, heavier than the smoke that still clung to their clothes, heavier than the mud pulling at their boots. No one dared to say it aloud, not after her whisper had cut through the firefight hours earlier. But the silence between them was no longer a shield. It was suspicion. The colonel's face was drawn, eyes sharp, scanning each man and woman as though the answer might slip free if he stared hard enough. He barked orders, his voice hoarse, trying to hold them together through sheer force of will. But cohesion was fragile now, fractured by doubt. The medic avoided everyone's gaze. The sergeant cleaned his weapon too carefully, too long. The private paced, his youth cracking into nervous energy. And she said nothing. Because her silence now wasn't about strength. It was about choice. She knew. She had seen the signs. The little inconsistencies, the strange delays in response time, the way one man's eyes shifted just before the ambush fell. She knew who had betrayed them. But speaking it aloud would shatter everything. So she carried it alone. They moved again before the sun fully cleared the horizon, every step more brittle than the last. The valley stretched out wide and open, the path to their objective uncertain. No more maps to trust, no more illusions of safety. Only instinct. The sergeant walked beside her, his voice pitched low. You said someone told them. You sure of that? She didn't look at him, just kept walking. He studied her profile. The silence answered him as clearly as words. Then why not tell us who? His voice cracked. You think protecting a traitor's worth all our lives? Her jaw tightened. The silence was a blade again, cutting deep. Finally she let her eyes flick toward him. Not long, just enough. His face softened, realization dawning. It's someone high, he muttered almost to himself. Isn't it? She said nothing. And the silence confirmed everything. By midday, the squad reached a ridge overlooking a plain scarred with shell craters, the husks of armored vehicles rusting under the sun. The air smelled of oil, burnt long ago but never forgotten. The colonel called a halt, his voice steadier than his face. We cross after nightfall, too exposed now. The squad settled in the shadows of broken machinery. Rations were chewed without taste. Water was sipped sparingly. The private sat near her, eyes fixed on the ruined horizon. His voice was quiet, tentative. You had someone too, didn't you? Someone you lost. Her breath caught. He was too young to ask it, too young to understand the weight of silence. And yet his question pierced the armor she'd held so long. She let herself see it again, her brother's face, laughing in sunlight, hair whipped by wind as he carried her up that mountain trail. His voice, don't let them mistake your silence for weakness. Her throat burned. She swallowed hard, forcing the memory back down into the silence where it belonged. The private looked at her, searching. Was it family? She turned her head away, didn't answer. But the way her shoulders stiffened told him enough. The colonel approached her as the squad dozed in shifts. He crouched low, voice low but sharp. I saw your face last night. You know who it is. She kept her eyes on the dirt, on the ants crawling through broken soil. His voice hardened. Damn it, soldier, I need the truth. You know I can't keep this squad together if you hold back. Slowly she lifted her gaze, met his, held it. And then she shook her head once, not in denial, in refusal. The colonel swore under his breath, your silence is going to kill us. Her silence answered, or save you. Night came. They moved again. The plain stretched endless beneath the stars, the broken hulks of war machines casting long shadows. Every crunch of boot on gravel sounded too loud. Every flicker of light felt like a beacon. Halfway across, a flare burst overhead, white fire raining down. Contact! Gunfire erupted from the ridgeline behind them. Bullets tore into steel wreckage, sparks flying. The squad scattered, diving behind craters and twisted metal. She rolled into cover, rifle snapping to her shoulder. Breath steady, shots precise, one target down, another. But the enemy was closing. The medic screamed as a round tore through his thigh. The private dragged him back, hands slippery with blood. The sergeant laid down fire, his jaw clenched, teeth bared. And she saw the traitor. Not firing, not shouting, just crouched head low, eyes darting not to the enemy but to the colonel's position, watching, waiting. Her chest burned, rage clawed at her throat. She wanted to shout his name, wanted to end it. But then she remembered her brother, his last words before that final mission, the one he never came back from. Not every truth saves. Some truths kill faster than bullets. She bit it back, kept her silence. And instead she fired, not at the traitor, at the enemy, at the real immediate threat. Because one battle at a time was all they could survive. By dawn the gunfire faded. The squad was battered, bleeding but alive. Barely. The colonel's face was ash pale, fury simmering beneath exhaustion. He didn't look at her, not yet. The medic was patched as best they could. The sergeant sat with his back to a wreck, staring at the sky, lips moving in a prayer no one could hear. The private stumbled to her side, voice raw. We can't keep this up. They know every move we make. How long before we all die out here? Her silence was heavier than ever. Because he was right. And because she knew why. Later, when the squad rested in the shadow of a burned-out transport, she let herself drift back into memory. The last night with her brother. He'd been packing gear, his uniform crisp, eyes tired but fierce. She begged him not to go. You can't change orders with silence, she'd whispered. He'd smiled, soft, and cupped her face. Maybe not, but silence can protect. Silence can carry weight others can't. She hadn't understood then, not fully. Now she did. Silence wasn't just hers, it was his legacy, his burden passed to her. And now, it was the only thing keeping this mission from collapsing entirely. The colonel finally approached as the sun dipped low again. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice ragged. If you know something, I need it now, not later, not when we're all dead. She looked at him for a long time. Her silence stretched, thick as the air before a storm. Finally, her lips parted. And then she closed them again. Because the truth wasn't ready yet. Not until the choice was clear. Not until the cost was undeniable. The squad moved again at nightfall. Shadows stretched long across the ruined earth, and the silence between them was no longer suspicion alone. It was anticipation, waiting for something to break. Every man and woman felt it, even if they didn't say it. Her silence wasn't just hers anymore, it was theirs. And soon it would either save them or destroy them. The night was too quiet. Not the quiet of peace, not the quiet of rest. It was the quiet that follows when everyone holds their breath, waiting for a blade to fall. Their boots pressed into ash as they moved through the ruins of a village. Once, long ago, people had lived here. Children had played in courtyards. Fires had burned warm behind doors now shattered. Now there was nothing but stone cracked by shelling, wood rotted by rain, and silence too thick to breathe. The squad's footsteps echoed like ghosts. Every corner could hide an ambush. Every shadow could be death. And worse, every soldier's back could hide a traitor. The colonel halted them beneath the broken arch of what had once been a church. The roof was gone, but the walls stood, jagged against the starlight. "We rest here 2 hours." His voice was clipped weary. The squad dispersed, each man and woman choosing a fragment of wall, a corner of shadow, a place far enough from the others to feel safe, close enough not to look guilty. The medic lay back, his legs stiff from the wound. The sergeant sat with his rifle across his knees, watching everything, saying nothing. The private curled against cold stone, his youth worn thin by blood and smoke. And she stood in the center, eyes lifted to the open sky. Stars scattered wide, too far, too silent. The sergeant approached her quietly. He was older than most, with lines carved into his face by years of fighting battles no one wanted to remember. His voice was low. "You've been holding something back since the ambush." She didn't look at him, just kept her gaze fixed on the stars. His hand tightened on his rifle. "I'm not stupid. You saw something, you know something." Silence. "You think protecting him is worth more than protecting the rest of us." His voice sharpened. Her jaw clenched. The sergeant leaned closer. "I'll find out who it is. And when I do, if you've been covering for him, your silence will make you as guilty as he is." He left her then, the weight of his accusation settling heavier than the night air. She closed her eyes and saw her brother again. He had been standing in the same way once, staring at the same stars, the night before his last mission. She had been only 16. He had looked down at her, his face soft with exhaustion and love. "You think silence is weakness," he had told her. "But silence is strength. Words get twisted, promises break, but silence that holds, that protects." She hadn't understood. She hadn't wanted to. Now she did. And now she hated him for it. Because silence was tearing her apart. The colonel called her aside as the others dozed in uneasy shifts. His eyes were dark hollows, his hands trembling faintly as he lit a cigarette against the wind. "You've been watching someone," he said. "No question, just fact." She didn't answer. He exhaled smoke, sharp and bitter. "Damn it, soldier, you think I can't see it. You think I haven't noticed the way you look at him." Her pulse hammered. The colonel's eyes narrowed. "Tell me his name. End this before it kills us all." She looked at him, and for the first time her silence wasn't steel, it was grief. The colonel's face changed. He saw it, he knew. "Family," he breathed. Her chest tightened. The colonel swore and dragged a hand down his face. "God help you. God help us all." The traitor wasn't just a soldier. He was her brother's friend, the man who had walked beside him on his final mission, the only one who had come back alive. She remembered his voice at the funeral. "I did everything I could. He saved me." She had believed him, wanted to believe him, needed to. But now, in the flickers of his eyes, the hesitation in his shots, the way he always seemed just a step out of place, she saw it. He hadn't saved her brother. He had betrayed him, just as he was betraying them now. The squad moved again at dawn, crossing the empty fields where grass grew tall around rusted barbed wire. The medic limped, leaning hard on the private. The sergeant scanned every horizon, finger always near the trigger. And she walked behind the traitor, her eyes locked on his back, every breath a war between memory and fury. At midday, the ambush came. A mortar shrieked from the ridge, exploding in fire and soil. Gunfire followed, cutting across the field. The squad dove for cover in a ditch, bullets snapping overhead. She returned fire, precise and cold. Enemy shapes fell in the grass. The sergeant roared orders, the private screamed in fear and rage, the medic groaned through clenched teeth. And the traitor, he froze, again. Not aiming, not firing, just crouching low, waiting. Waiting for them to die. Her finger tightened on the trigger, one shot to end it now. But then the memory, her brother's hand on her shoulder, his voice, not every truth saves, not every bullet frees. She turned her rifle, fired at the ridge instead. The enemy fell. The squad crawled forward, inch by inch, blood and sweat mixing with dirt. The battle dragged until dusk. When silence returned, 3 enemies lay dead. The rest had fled. The squad was alive, barely. But suspicion was no longer hidden. The sergeant confronted her in the dark as they bandaged wounds. His face was hard, his voice harder. "It's him, isn't it? I've seen the way you watch him, the way he doesn't fire." She stared at him, silent. The sergeant's teeth clenched. "If you won't say it, I will. He's the reason we're bleeding out here. He's the one feeding them." The traitor turned his head then, eyes sharp, dangerous. "Careful with your words, Sergeant." The air snapped tight, like a wire stretched to breaking. The colonel stepped between them, voice thunderous. "Enough." His eyes cut to her, demanding, pleading. She lowered her gaze and said nothing. That night, as the squad lay in broken sleep, she sat awake, rifle across her knees, eyes on the traitor's shadow. She thought of her brother again, the way his body had been lowered into the earth, the silence that had filled the air where his voice should have been. He had died because of that man. And now, men and women she fought beside were dying too. Her silence was no longer protection, it was complicity. The weight of it pressed so hard against her chest she could barely breathe. But still she held it, because to break it would break the squad before the mission was done. And if the mission failed, her brother's death would mean nothing. At dawn, the colonel gathered them. His face was carved from stone, his voice rough. "We move into the mountains today. The enemy is waiting, but so is our objective. We end this." The squad nodded, weary but resolute. The traitor stood among them, silent, calm. And she walked beside him, her silence now louder than any shout. Because the time for words was coming. And when it came, the truth would burn louder than gunfire. The mountains rose like broken teeth against the horizon. Jagged, dark, unforgiving. They had marched since dawn, boots scraping across rock, breath frosting in the thinning air. The path wound upward through narrow passes, cliffs sheer on either side. One mistake, one loose stone, and a body would vanish into shadow below. Every step was harder than the last, not from the climb, not from the wounds. From the silence. The sergeant led point, scanning the ridges above with eyes that never blinked. His jaw was set, his knuckles white on his rifle. Behind him, the medic limped in grim determination, sweat soaking his shirt despite the cold. The private stumbled, half carrying their supplies, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. The colonel walked last, his gaze steady, watching all of them as if waiting for someone to break. And between them, the traitor. Moving smoothly, too smoothly, every step measured, every glance calculated. And she walked just behind him, her silence now heavier than the mountains themselves. The wind howled through the pass, carrying whispers that sounded almost like voices. The private flinched at every gust, clutching his rifle tighter. "Feels like we're walking into a grave," he muttered, his voice cracked with youth and terror. The sergeant snapped over his shoulder, "Shut it, save your breath." But even the sergeant couldn't hide the truth. His eyes flicked too often to the ridges, His trigger finger twitched. The colonel's voice finally broke the tension. "We're close." Close to what, he didn't say. No one asked. They camped that night in a hollow of stone, the fire small, the shadows vast. The mountains loomed above like silent judges. The medic worked in the dim light, unwrapping his bandages, wincing as he cleaned the wound. "Won't last much longer like this," he admitted softly. "But I'll get you through tomorrow. After that, can't promise." The private swallowed hard. "Tomorrow's the worst of it, right? After tomorrow, we're done." No one answered. The sergeant looked at the traitor instead, eyes hard as steel. "Funny thing," he said, voice low, dangerous. "We've fought through ambush after ambush, and yet somehow they're always waiting for us, always ready." The traitor didn't flinch, just met his stare calmly. "Maybe they're smarter than you think." The sergeant's hand tightened on his rifle. The colonel cut in, sharp as a blade. "Enough." But the firelight showed the cracks now, deep and dangerous. The squad was no longer a unit. They were fragments. And she, the one holding silence, was the fault line. That night sleep would not come. She lay awake, eyes fixed on the jagged sky, stars cut by the mountain peaks. Her breath clouded faintly in the cold air. Beside the dying fire, the traitor sat awake too, his face unreadable in the shadows. She remembered his face at her brother's funeral, the grief he had worn like armor, the words he had spoken that had steadied her when her world fell apart. "He saved me. He died so I could live. I owe him everything." But lies can sound like truth when spoken with the right voice. And silence can carry heavier than words. Her chest ached with it, her throat burned with it. One sentence, one truth could end this. But would it end them all? Dawn came cold and brutal. The squad moved again, climbing higher, the air thin, every breath a labor. The path narrowed to a knife-edge ridge. One misstep would send a body tumbling into the abyss. The private stumbled, caught himself, whispered a prayer beneath his breath. The medic pushed forward, teeth gritted against pain. And the traitor, calm as always, too calm. His hand brushed against the rock as if he knew the way too well. The sergeant saw it. She saw the flicker in his eyes. The trap was near. It happened fast. Gunfire cracked from above, echoing between cliffs. Dust exploded around them as bullets struck rock. The private screamed and dropped to his knees. The medic dragged him against the wall, shielding him with his own body. The sergeant returned fire, his shots sharp, precise. The colonel barked orders, dragging them forward, driving them through the kill zone. And the traitor again froze. Not fear, not shock. Waiting. Waiting for them to fall. Her rifle was raised, her breath held. Her finger tightened on the trigger. This time, silence wasn't protection. This time, silence was death. She fired. Not at the ridge. At him. The bullet struck stone an inch from his head, spraying dust across his face. His eyes snapped to hers, wide with shock. The squad froze. Even under fire, even with bullets hissing past, they froze. The sergeant's face twisted in vindication. "I knew it." The colonel's voice thundered, "Stand down." But it was too late. The traitor lunged at her, his rifle swinging. She rolled, the shot missing her by inches, ringing against stone. The sergeant fired back, the bullet grazing the traitor's arm. He stumbled, cursed, but fled into the rocks. The colonel roared, "Hold position." But she was already moving. Her silence had broken. And now there was only truth. The gunfire above faded as the enemy scattered. The squad dragged the medic and private into cover, panting, bleeding, alive. But she was gone. Chasing him. Her boots pounded against stone, breath tearing in her lungs, rifle clutched tight. The traitor's shadow flickered between rocks ahead, his blood marking the path. He knew the mountains, he knew the trails, but she knew him. Every step was rage and grief. Every breath was her brother's ghost. The silence she had carried for so long had cracked wide open, and now it burned in her veins like fire. She would not stop. Not until it ended. When night fell, she stood alone on a high ridge, the wind screaming around her, the world stretched vast and dark below. Ahead, a figure moved through the shadows. Him. He turned, face pale in the moonlight, eyes sharp with something between defiance and desperation. "You don't understand," he shouted over the wind. "I did what I had to, he chose it, he gave me up so I could live." The words struck her like bullets, but the silence in her chest still held. Her rifle rose. Her breath steadied. The choice was hers. And the mountains waited for her answer. The mountain wind cut sharp, carrying the taste of iron. She stood on the ridge, her rifle steady, her breath a slow drumbeat in the hollow of her chest. The figure before her, no longer just a soldier, no longer just a man, was every shadow she had carried, every unanswered question, every night her brother's ghost had whispered in her dreams. He bled from his arm, the wound seeping dark through his sleeve. Yet his stance was still defiant, his eyes alive with the same calm he had worn every step of the mission. "You don't want to do this," he said. His voice was steady, but the wind swallowed its edges. "Not here, not like this." Her silence was the answer. Her finger brushed the trigger. And for the first time since her brother's funeral, her hands shook. He took a step closer, not reckless, not afraid, careful, deliberate. "You think I betrayed him. You've thought it for a long time." Her chest tightened. The rifle didn't move. His voice broke softer now. "But you don't know what happened up there. You weren't there." She had heard those words before, at the graveside in the weeks after, whispered by others who didn't understand. But from him they cut deeper. Because he had been there. Because he had lived when her brother had not. And because silence had never let her ask why. The sergeant's voice echoed in her memory. "If you won't say it, I will." The colonel's warning, family. Her brother's ghost, silence is strength. But now silence was no longer strength. It was suffocation. She lowered the rifle a fraction, the first crack in her wall. Her voice came rough, jagged, like stone breaking. "Then tell me." The wind seemed to pause. His eyes softened just for a moment. He exhaled, long and heavy, like a man carrying years of weight. "It wasn't an ambush," he began. His voice trembled once, then steadied. "Not at first. We were compromised before we even left. Someone higher up, someone feeding them everything. We walked straight into it, dozens of them, more than we could count." Her throat ached. She could see it, the valley, the fire, the smoke. The same scene she had built in her nightmares, painted by silence. "We fought," he said. "We fought until there was nothing left. He kept us moving, kept us alive. He was," his voice caught. "He was unstoppable, but then we ran out of cover. We were surrounded. He knew it. I knew it." The man's eyes lifted to hers, raw. "He grabbed me, shoved me behind the rocks, told me to stay down." Her heart hammered. "He stood up," he whispered. "He drew their fire, all of it. He bought me the seconds I needed. And then he fell." The wind tore the words away, but the silence that followed was heavier. Her brother standing alone, choosing death so another could live. It was too vivid, too true. "And yet," her voice broke out, sharp as glass, "then why didn't you tell me? Why let me carry silence instead of truth?" His face twisted, pain raw and unhidden. "Because what would you have done with it? You would have hated me anyway, blamed me anyway. I lived and he didn't. That's enough to hate a man for." Her breath came in ragged bursts. He stepped closer, voice rough now, no longer calm. "I've carried it every day, the guilt, the shame, the look in his eyes when he made his choice. I wanted to believe it was sacrifice, but part of me," his words cracked, "part of me thinks he knew I wouldn't last out there, that I was the weaker one, that I wasn't worth saving." His eyes glistened in the moonlight, something broken within them. And he was right, because I failed him again. I failed you all. The rifle trembled in her hands. For years she had lived with silence, filling it with anger, filling it with suspicion, building walls so high she could no longer hear the truth when it called. Now the truth stood before her, ugly, broken, human. He wasn't the traitor she had imagined in her sleepless nights. He was something worse. A man who had lived when he shouldn't. A man who had carried silence like she had, only his was heavier. Behind them the faint echoes of gunfire rose. The squad still fought, still bled in the rocks below. The mission hadn't paused for their reckoning. She thought of the private's shaking hands, the medic's limp, the sergeant's fury, the colonel's hollow eyes. If she pulled the trigger now, ended it, it wouldn't bring her brother back. It wouldn't save the squad. It would just be silence again. Different silence. He saw it in her eyes. His shoulders slumped. His voice softened to a whisper only she could hear above the wind. Do it if you need to. I won't stop you. Her finger pressed harder against the trigger. And then she let out the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The rifle lowered. Her voice, hoarse, trembling but alive, finally broke the silence that had chained her for so long. No, not here, not like this. He staggered at the words, as if the bullet had landed anyway. His eyes closed, head bowed. She turned away, her boots crunching on stone, her body shaking with the force of release. Behind her his voice rose again, small, cracked, barely carried by the wind. What do I tell them when they ask why you spared me? She stopped, her back to him. And for the first time, her silence carried not grief, not complicity, not fear, but choice. When she spoke, it was almost a whisper. Tell them the truth. The path down from the ridge stretched long and jagged, the sounds of battle pulling her back to the squad. Every step was lighter, every breath freer, though her heart still burned raw. The silence she carried now was different. Not the silence of hiding. Not the silence of lies. The silence of strength. The silence her brother had meant. And with it, she descended into the fight once more. Because it wasn't finished. Not yet. The storm had passed, but silence lingered. Not the silence of fear, not anymore. It was the silence of something greater. The field was still. Charred earth, broken steel, and the faint whisper of wind moving through empty helmets left behind. The survivors stood apart, staring at her, though no one said her name. They didn't need to. She was sitting on the edge of a ruined wall, her rifle across her lap, the weight of it almost forgotten. For the first time in what felt like centuries, her hands weren't trembling. She looked up, catching the first burn of dawn across the horizon. Red skis, ash drifting. It was almost beautiful. She thought of the voices, the ones who mocked her silence, the ones who called her fragile, detached, unreachable. She remembered the way they used to laugh, half in jest, half in dismissal. They never understood that silence wasn't absence. It was weight. It was patience. It was her shield. And in the end, it was what carried them here. A medic approached, moving carefully, almost reverently. He didn't ask how she was, didn't tell her to rest. He only set a canteen beside her boot and walked away. It was the smallest of gestures, but in it lay the truth. They knew. They finally knew. Her silence had saved them. The mission, fragile, impossible, had held because she never let it fracture, because she didn't waste words when resolve was enough, because when the moment came, she carried their fear and gave back nothing but focus. And now, as the sun broke wider, painting the world in bruised gold, she felt the weight of something she hadn't let herself touch in years. Hope. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a photo, edges torn, faces faded. Her brother, his crooked grin, his hand raised in farewell. The promise she had carried into the dark, fulfilled at last. The world would never know his name, maybe not even hers, but that wasn't the point. Sometimes the loudest courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it doesn't argue, doesn't demand to be seen. It simply stays, steadfast, patient, silent. Her eyes closed, her lips barely moving as the dawn's wind carried her final thought like a prayer across the ruins. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And with that she stood, her silence rising with her, stronger than any anthem, the last echo of a mission that lived because she endured.